There once was a man who lived among mountains. All his life he dreamed and investigated his own dreams and other people's. He was a psychiatrist who talked about the soul, a scientist and a scholar, a man committed to finding meaning in our everyday lives. His dreams have changed our ideas. His name was Carl Gustav Jung.
He wrote the first introduction to Zen Buddhism. He began with Greek mythology, or didn't begin, but at least brought it in. He, the gods and the goddesses, the myths. He was concerned with the American Indians. He visited them. He was interested in synchronicity. He was interested in astrology. And he wrote on all these subjects and had lots of good things to say about them. What's the value of your dreams in the everyday world? What's the value of your fantasies in the everyday world? These are enormously important, the sense of being a mess of complexes. Jung gave us all that.
It's a cliche to talk about now the meaning of life or something being meaningful or not meaningful. And I think Jung, in a way, is responsible for this kind of cliche.
Carl Gustav Jung's work brought dreams and the unconscious into the modern world and introduced a respect for the psyche in human affairs. In 1957, aged 82, Jung gave his first film interview. His thoughts touch upon universal questions, from love, marriage and relationships to international hostilities. Characteristically, Jung expressed his political thoughts in terms of the psyche.
Nowadays, particularly, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that is the psyche of man. We are the great danger. The psyche is the great danger. What if something goes wrong with the psyche? You see?
Since his death in 1961, Jung's ideas have become increasingly influential. His work in the world has been extended into the psychological study of war and war trauma, architecture, alcoholism and drug addiction, the stock market, aging, senility and death, even movies and movie stars. In many countries, especially the United States, Jungian psychology is tackling new themes. For San Francisco analyst John Beebe, it's the movies.
Whenever you see a film in a dream, someone is watching a film or going to the movies, that's a not uncommon dream image. I think it means that we're looking at a situation that has been thoroughly studied. It's been cut and edited, so to speak, and honed in on and presented for us, and it's a completely understood situation now. And if we just watch it through, we will have a complete sense of what it is.
In the book that was compiled from a series of his seminars on dreams, Jung himself spoke of the psychological vitality of film.
The movies are far more efficient than the theatre. They are less restricted. They are able to produce amazing symbols to show the collective unconscious, since their methods of presentation are so unlimited.
Because in our own individual life, we only get a chance to see perhaps one little piece of a whole archetypal pattern. But in a movie, we can have the whole pattern laid out for us in a couple of hours. And in a great enough film, there's really a sense of having been translocated from one's own personal experience and the little pit that one has experienced to something truly universal. And I think that's what the archetype can do. It's sort of a ticket of admission to a broader perspective.
The patients who came to consult Jung at his house in Kusnacht varied widely, from American heiresses and the German writer Hermann Hesse to the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. Dr. Jeffrey Satinover.
Basically, the motive for starting Alcoholics Anonymous came out of a patient of Jung's experience. And Jung's communicating to that patient the idea that essentially he was not going to ever successfully get over his alcoholism if he did not find God.
The official history of Alcoholics Anonymous traces the group's origins to Jung's diagnosis of the incurable alcoholic known only as Roland H.
His craving for alcohol was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, expressed in medieval language, the union with God.
What people seek in addictive experience is something which in and of itself is normal. That is to say, the craving is normal. The craving for certain kinds of elation, for a certain sense of specialness, for heroism, for cessation of pain, and underlying all of those really, ultimately and most powerful, is the seeking of a sense of meaningfulness.
Dr. Jeffrey Satinover has established a clinic specializing in senility and Alzheimer's disease and addiction to drugs and alcohol.
You've seen some of the early signs of it already.
The therapy goes beyond the alcoholic or senile patient to include other family members.
What we hope an individual will gain from the psychotherapeutic dimension of substance abuse treatment is a way of finding meaning in their lives again. Because, as Jung correctly recognized, ultimately the key motivating factor in the beginning of an addiction is the seeking of spirit.
When Roland H. first arrived in his consulting room, Jung told him that unless he could find a way to a religious or spiritual experience, his addiction was incurable.
You see, alcohol in Latin is spiritus, and you use the same word for the highest religious experience as well as for the most depraving poison. The helpful formula, therefore, is spiritus contra spiritum.
Dionysus was not the god of drunkenness. He was the god of ecstatic vision. He was a god of wine, but that was the wine of religion, not the wine of drunkenness.
For Robert Johnson, the Greek god Dionysus offers an insight into the modern epidemic of alcoholism. Johnson draws on mythology for fables of psychological reality. His latest book considers the gods of antiquity and our universal need for emotional highs, or ecstasy.
It is basic, and if we don't get our ecstasy, which is an archetypal quality, in a legitimate way, we will get it in an illegitimate way, which accounts for much of the chaos of this culture now. We have to have an ecstatic dimension of our life.
In all ancient cultures, the heights of the mountains and the heavens have been identified as the place of the gods. Moses received the Ten Commandments from his god on the mountaintop. The Greek gods dwelt on Mount Olympus. The Pueblo Indians lived close to their father sun on the 6,000-foot high plateau of New Mexico.
The metaphor of height applied to a mental state is universal. And when an individual seeks the experience of getting high, the implication is that they chronically, or as a matter of course, do not feel high.
But the modern age has conquered all the heights and even invaded the heavens. Jung was dismayed.
The gods have become diseases. Zeus no longer rules Olympus, but rather the solar plexus, and produces curious specimens for the doctor's consulting room, or disorders the brains of politicians and journalists, who unwittingly let loose psychic epidemics on the world.
That's a quote from Dr. Jung. He said, when we dismantled Olympus, we turned the gods into symptoms. If there's not, this is only a restatement of a moment ago, if we don't get a particular archetypal quality legitimately, it will, so to speak, pop up somewhere in its symptomatic, that is, its compulsive form.
The Swiss analyst Adolf Guggenbhül-Craig, perhaps surprisingly, sees the business world as another example of the archetypal quest for the gods or the soul.
When you deal with money, you really know if you were right or wrong. You know, you lose or you win. There's no argument. You lost or you win. And it might give you then an elated feeling, nearly a religious feeling that you were on the right side, that you were so much in touch with the gods that you actually won. The speculators, the people who really only deal with money, they don't really deal with money as a thing to buy something with, but they deal with money because they want to get more gold or they want to get more soul in the end. I think the speculators speculate that they think they can get a life essence by having more and more money.
The business world remains a masculine world. It was Jung's view that masculine, patriarchal values have produced a culture which neglects the soul and the balancing influence of the feminine psyche. Analyst Andrew Samuels.
Jung intuited an imbalance in Western culture in favor of one whole style of psychological and behavioral functioning, in favor of analysis, in favor of logic, in favor of external achievement, in favor of social hierarchicalism and so forth. He asked, what happened to the other side?
He entered into reflection, both conscious and unconscious, at a time when, culturally, the role of women was changing and shifting. People began to protest and wanted the vote and so on. So he contributed to something which has become a movement of our times.
I think the feminine stands against organization, for example, against organized religion. It stands against hierarchy, for example, class systems. It stands against an overdependence on logic and rationality, so that the hard sciences are challenged. It stands against an excessive dependency on technology, and so it espouses natural issues, an interest in ecology, in the environment.
We women embody life. You men act upon life. That resonates psychologically, which means that we are constantly working with it in terms of our aims, our ideals, our understandings and perceptions of what it's like to be ourselves now and in life.
Jung observed that for every woman there was a masculine aspect within her psyche, the archetype of the animus, and for every man, a feminine counterpart, the anima.
The anima is an archetypal form expressing the fact that a man has a minority of feminine or female genes. Yeah. And that is something that doesn't disappear in him, that is constantly present. And it works as a female in a man. The same is the case with the animus. That is a masculine image in a woman's mind, which is not sometimes quite conscious, sometimes it is not conscious, but it is called into life the moment that woman meets a man who says the right things. And then because he said it is all true, and he is the fellow. No matter what he is. Yeah.
And the whole point is that the female ego has to be in charge of the animus. Now, that's not a generally accepted idea, because the old hangover of you lean on men and men will somehow make your life interesting or something, and you just lose all your own ideas or innovations or creativity. And I think a lot of women are scared out of being who they are and doing whatever is important to them still.
The animus to me is one of the most significant concepts that has arisen in Jungian psychology. It speaks of the function that connects a woman with her deepest self and personhood, her creativity, the unformed that's forming as she ages, her work, her word, her ideas, herself, her person.
In the Alfred Hitchcock film Notorious, John Beebe finds a drama of the animus in the conflict between a woman and men.
Just a minute, Miss Huberman. Hold it, Miss Huberman. Look this way, would you please? We'd like a statement from you, Miss Huberman, about your father.
For instance, do you think your father got what he deserved?
Could we say that you're pleased your father is going to pay the penalty for being a German worker?
Now notice the way the woman is badgered by a series of men. All the people holding cameras are men, and all the people who speak to her are men. And so you immediately get the image of a woman in a vulnerable position, badgered by a group or a series of men. Now there's the perfect image of what Jung means by the animus. The way the animus attacks the woman, and the way it's often symbolized by a multiple figure or a crowd, and the way it moves in on the woman and judges her. The cameras are all in the lower left hand of the screen. And then gradually we realize that in the lower left hand there is now one man whose viewpoint we have, and he's a dark, kind of unknown figure. She's half attracted to him, half suspicious of him, wonders, is he a policeman? This is the experience of so many women of constantly being under an attack. Do I look okay? Is my reputation okay? The camera turns, and finally he becomes a personality in his own right. Indeed, he's Cary Grant.
There's one more drink left, appease. Shame about the ice.
So that the very critic, the very thing that's most attacking the woman, is also somehow the thing that's most erotically exciting, and the most interesting, and the most energetic. And there, in a little nutshell, you get the problem of the animus.
Now, see, the archetype is a force, it has an autonomy. It can suddenly seize you. It is like a seizure. So, for instance, falling in love at first sight, that is such a case. You see, you have a certain image in yourself without knowing it of the woman, of the woman. Yeah. Now you see that girl, or at least a good imitation of your type. Yeah. And instantly you get a seizure, and you're gone. Yeah. And afterwards you may discover that it was a hell of a mistake.
The concepts of animus and anima emerged as Jung observed the lives and psychological realities of his patients, and they help in understanding both the pain and the delights of human relationship. Robert Johnson.
Man insists upon making some outer figure, generally a flesh and blood woman, bear his anima for him. That is, he mediates the outer world by way of his anima instead of using her inside where she belongs. This produces more suffering and more upset and more pain than any other single thing that I know about.
Oh, you see, a man is quite capable, he's intelligent enough to see that woman of his choice, as one says, not no choice, he has been captured. You know, he sees that she is no good at all, that she is a hell of a business. And he tells me so, and he said, for God's sake, doctor, help me to get rid of that woman. He can't. He's like clay in her fingers. And that is the archetype. That is so-called archetype of the anima.
This contribution of Jung's animus and anima theory is not only of immense use in understanding relationship difficulties and the joys and richnesses of relationships, but is actually something, as with all the best ideas, that people, ordinary people, are doing anyway. That's a real acid test of all psychological theory. If it really turns out to be a description of what's happening, it's good theory.
James Hillman was Director of Studies at the Jung Institute in Zurich. After 25 years in Switzerland, he returned to America, to Dallas, Texas.
The soundtrack to your weekend lifestyle. 106.1, The Oasis.
Hillman analyzes patients' dreams, but also sees the image of psyche in the architecture of cities and the shape and atmosphere of a landscape.
The modern city is not for people, it's for business. And you drive in from the suburbs, you drive your car underground, put it in the garage, you don't come into the street at all, and then go up the elevator, and that's it. Walk up and down the halls, you could be in any kind of office building. And it's nothing to do with people. The thing about Dallas would be, see, the thing about the psyche in the world is that it's in the world, and it's the places themselves have a psyche. And that psyche speaks through how it displays itself. What do we see in this building? What is this building displaying itself as? So that it has to have no openings on the ground floor for people, but just repelling walls. What is it for a building to be absolutely skinny and bare-boned and stretching way up and empty on the interior with an atrium? I mean, that's an anorexic building. What are mirrored sunglasses telling us? You certainly can't look into the soul of the person, into his eyes or her eyes. It's again that paranoid perspective of I can see you, but you can't see me. You feel different things in different buildings. But it isn't only that, it's also the way the room is lit, with a light coming straight down on you that casts no shadow, windows that can't be opened. You're in a little prison room. So of course you're going to have illnesses inside offices and psychological breakdown, which you can't just clarify by going to an analyst once a week. There's a darkness in the soil here. New England has the dead Indians and the dead witches and the dead Puritans and the, you know, we're walking over the dead here, really. And they give the soil more, the psyche of the soil, much more sadness. This sense of the soil having blood in it gives depth to, gives soul to a place. Now, if the mood is in the landscape, not just in your eye, but the mood is in the landscape, then it's got a soul. And what the history of the landscape will be there, too.
Jung observed the unchanging human need for archetypal experiences. Today, the gods have vanished, and we seek ecstasy and meaning in wealth and power, drugs and alcohol, or the lives of the famous. We project our fantasies onto public figures, political leaders, royalty, sporting heroes, musicians and movie stars.
The collective unconscious is too big to live out personally. It's like asking someone to cope with the 100,000 volt power in a high tension line through the 110 volt wiring of the house to live out the collective unconscious himself. Much of it has to be lived by projection.
I think there's no question that the person involved can get quite confused with the archetypal image that's being portrayed, and that can confuse people on both sides of the screen, so to speak. Well, the famous example is Marilyn Monroe, and in a dream, which she apparently reported to someone and was written down, she was standing naked in a church, and all kinds of people were coming in and worshiping her there. And of course, simply said this is the love goddess, but in its religious aspect. It seems to me that her education and her consciousness and the amount of security she had in her early background didn't give her a strong enough ego or a strong enough personality to stand up to an archetypal image like that and criticize it and say, well, it's as if in some way my image is terribly important to people and has religious significance, and no wonder there's so little goddess in our culture. No wonder they would use me in this way. And I think there the person gets swallowed by the image.
These men are veterans of the Vietnam War. To Jungian psychologists, as to Jung himself, war and war experiences are just as psychological as falling in love. Dr. Harry Wilmer.
It isn't just there is good, there is evil, but there is both, and there's both in us. And that connects with the shadow, with the dark side. That's something I never understood prior to the kind of Jungian work that I did.
Jung observed that in personal relationships and the dealings between communities, the dark side, or the shadow, exists alongside bright and positive qualities. And he saw that the shadow, when not accepted and understood, will be projected within marriage, within the workplace, within warfare, and within dreams.